fall on any ears that would hear it. If but you could have come with me, my brother, on my latest mission to Haven. It was a rousing venture rife with bloodshed and intrigue. Inspired by the Venturian Guard, House Duchinius had a change of heart regarding your loyalties to the Overlord, so I rode without rest on rumors that they had fled to Ardent. Several days of hounding passed before I was able to locate them and rend their bellies, but by my blade, the blood that once ruled Haven ran red in their streets. Well, good for you, man. Chucklebone. You'll be wanting to speak with the lady in his honor. Fatebinder Furia. The circumstances were... Well, it was madness, your honor. No one could be expected to act in a rational way. No? Perhaps I expect too much of my servants. Is that it? No, your honor. But if you hear my testimony, I think you'll understand. I see a better alternative as presented itself. Fatebinder, will you audience this case in my stead? I'm curious what manner of conclusion you draw. I'm ready to hear the case. Excellent. The testimony will begin. I'm afraid it's a sensitive matter. I was away from the city, seeing to military camp, when I discovered 2 Scarlet Chorus soldiers. She clears her throat and holds her posture firm, defiling a woman. A local from the Tiers? Yes, and I understand that it's a common enough occurrence in that army, but I couldn't stand for it. I was brought up to know better. She looks up at Tunon. I was taught to be better. What happened next? I fought the recruits, they fought back, but in the end my skills won out. After they were both dead, I let the poor woman go. Their gang boss witnessed everything, though he didn't intervene until it was all done. I was trussed up and brought back to the court in a wagon where you find me now. And what fine company you made on the journey over. The gang boss spreads his lips open in a toothy grin. The defendant is charged with the murder of subjects who were owed the protection of Kairos' law. Fatebinder, I assume you wish to cross-examine. Why isn't the victim of assault a matter of concern? She was a denizen of the Tiers. She has no right under Kairos' law. This is a simple murder trial and the defendant stands before you. I would caution against burdening yourself with extraneous variables. The gang boss didn't intervene at all. If my recruit couldn't defend themselves against a glorified clerk, then their lives were forfeit as far as I was concerned. Good riddance. I'm still happy to get satisfactions out of the matter. The law is the law. All he did was joke about how the court would be merciless. Laughed all the way up to the bastard city. Didn't seem particularly bent out of shape over his lost man. That sounds about right. Did you speak with the Tiers woman? Only briefly. She thanked me before fleeing. I didn't want to keep her. She suffered enough at the hands of those soldiers. You don't think she said anything about wishing to join the army? She glances at you with frank curiosity. The army, not that I... Thinking, she frowns. Guide the witness, as she definitely wasn't in the area for that very purpose. Her eyes widen as she realizes your intent. The Fatebinder nods. That's right. She only mentioned it in passing, but she told me that she was attempting to make contact with the Scarlet Chorus. You know, to join them. That was when the soldier attacked. I hope this has a point, Fatebinder. Do you regret your actions? She frowns in thought. No, if our positions were reversed, I would have wanted someone to step in on my behalf. Kairos' law be damned. She glances up at Tunon with momentary unease. I suppose I should keep my distance from the Scarlet Chorus in the future. I might not be able to restrain myself if I saw it happening again. I'm ready to give my ruling. Very good. Present the verdict and let us be done with this unpleasant affair. If the woman intended to join the Scarlet Chorus, she was protected under Kairos' law. Your actions were just. She delivers a bow of gratitude, holding your eye contact the entire time. Thank you for hearing my case. Fatebinder Furia, you have docked Kairos' punishment with a technicality. Be more mindful of your delicate position in the future. Your grasp of Kairos' law troubles me. It reeks of independent thoughts, owned beyond the principal walls of my court, and yet it is your ruling. Dismissed. Whew, man, we have to navigate this pretty intensely. We don't want to piss off Tunon too much. I mean, I want to piss him off, don't get me wrong. Ideally, I would want everybody from Kairos to die, but it's interesting. Fatebinder Callio. Greetings. Your exploits at Vendrian's Well are the topic of much discussion. One begins to question the intent behind your methods, Shino7. I hope you're not wandering a path from which you cannot return. In spite of my reservation, I am most curious to hear of your travels. What can I do for you? Has anything happened while I was away? There have been whispers that Karen grew disloyal to Graven Ash's command during the campaign in Azure. I took up the mantle of investigation near Plainsgate, and judging the rumors to be true, dispatched Cairn by proclaiming Kairos' Edict of Stone. The very earth turned against the traitorous Archon as the region split asunder in righteous judgment. You seem to know much of my actions. Have you been spying on me? Don't act so surprised. It is my duty to ensure that those who operate under the Adjudicator's name adhere to the spirits of his law. It's not, if not the very letter. Hold on, guys. It's a lot of reading. Whew! And those who don't will be dealt with swiftly and efficiently at the point of Blendenmark's blade. The Fatebinder slips a slim dagger from the folds of her purple garb, flipping the weapon almost idly in the air. Of course, that is assuming I don't dispatch them first. I take my duty seriously, and I am very, very good at it. How have you occupied your time in the Bastard City? Tunans sends me on assignments here and there. I settle disputes between the locals when the Adjudicator is otherwise occupied. She smirks. Everything from trade disagreements to pushing chorus squatters out of basements, real rewarding work. She waves it off. The glory of war is not an honor reserved for the likes of us. We're the fish swimming in Tunan's wake, picking up scraps along the way. We are rather large and imposing compared to the bottom feeders of the tiers, but fish all the same. I'd like to know more about Tunan. Tunan is our overlord's fair and exacting adjudicator. He speaks with the voice of Kairos' law, and his word is judgment. All of this and more you can learn by asking him yourself. Go on, or does he intimidate you still? She chuckles softly. I jest, of course. You wrote that you could illuminate the darker corners of Teradus. She glances at your cadre. In a private missive, yes. There are things I won't discuss within the hearing of outside ears. Address your followers. I need to speak to the Fatebinder privately. I suppose not every conversation need to be recorded. The sage shuffles away. The hulking man shrugs. As you wish. He takes up a position outside of hearing range, standing just shy of at attention. Far be it from me to intrude on your very important Fatebinder secrets. The Tidecaster crosses her arms and walks away. A sly smile dimples her left cheek. I confess to no small amount of curiosity. I peek into my share of shadows, and sometimes I scrounge up a secret. What excites your interest? I'd like to discuss the archons of the Ender forces. Entirely understandable given the circumstances. How can I enlighten you? Why do the archons have such unusual names? Is yours so typical? She asks, palms offered, followed by a shrug. Tunan claims that his name has always been Tunan, much as he expects us to carry out our service without resorting to sobriquets or pseudonyms. Our Archon of War was only Ash before Kairos added the Graven, and Cairn, she lapsed into a momentary considered silence. I've always suspected that was the Overlord's private joke. She shakes her head as if rattling the idea free. Suffice it to say, when you've drawn that much attention, you're called what the Overlord calls you. Okay, that's enough about the Archons. I wanted to ask you about the rest of Teradus. I've done more than a little traveling in my role as Tunan's agent. What would you know? Do you know of any legends from the rest of Teradus? Friedman frowns. That can be a dangerous question, Shino7. If you're asking after stories of Archons, great warriors, or those who've defied the Overlord, I direct you to Rogalus, or Archon Tunan, maybe even the Voices of Nerat if you can stomach the company. Or I'm sure your pet sage would be happy to enlighten you. I can't imagine why else you might shelter him, if not for his historical commentary. But if you seek the superstitious drivel that kingdoms tend to cling to before the Overlord comes to sweep it away in favor of order and reason, well, Kairos forbids the knowledge for a reason. I recommend against the pursuit of folklore or on general principle. Okay. I thought you might have interesting take on a matters arcane. And you came to me. She chuckles. Don't let the Fatebinder of Lore know. He'll never forgive you. What answers do you seek? What do you know about the sigils and their casting? I'm a practical magician, not a theorist. If you're looking for the whys of magic, I'd direct you to Regulus. You know, I'm sure that sigils are derived from the personal marks of the Archons. My understanding is that it goes a bit deeper than that. That there's something of a question about whether the Archons are stamping their will indelibly on Terradus or unearthing some hitherto unknown aspect of magic and giving shape to it. It's one of those questions that serves little pragmatic purposes. Some Archons, like Occulted Jade of the Tidecaster, teach their sigils to followers, building a group of supporters. Other times, as in the case of Siren, the sigil is developed by those studying the Archon's work. In many cases, Archon Cairns for instance, it's a little of both. Most guilds guard their secrets closely, but secrets have a way of slipping free. The oldest sigils can be uncovered by those who know where to look, hidden within scrolls squirreled away in libraries or even at the larger markets. Why have we not been taught the sigil of Tunons or Bled and Mark? Notice that, did you? She grins. I wouldn't presume to speculate on the Archon's motive, nor would I encourage you to. Quite the opposite, in fact. She taps her lips. It's probably for the best, honestly. The Court of Fatebinder elicits enough fear among the citizenry and envy among the Archon as it is. More power could very well make our work more difficult rather than less. Do you know anything of the movement of the Celestial Sphere? Hey, Retired! Thank you so much for the hope. Do appreciate it, man. She tucks a strand of hair behind her behind her right ear. I'm no astrologist, but I have the basics. There are the stars which seem set in the firmaments to the eye, yet shift with the seasons. They serve as a constant source of superstition among those who have yet to come under the Overlord's rule. They speak of the constellations as ascended archons and mythic monsters. She grins, all very illegal. The Overlord has dictated the proper name for the asterism and the correct method of which to interpret their movement. Terradus' grave, of course, dominates the night sky, locked in place above us as Antiloper slips silently from horizon to horizon each night, but everyone knows about them. A Tidecaster might be able to tell you more, were one willing to speak openly. Other phenomena exist, of course, matters less well understood. The comets, planets, and auroras. She shrugs. All beautiful and silent, useful in navigation and time measurement, and for the pale light they provide, but very little else. Okay, that's all for my question about the arcane. Let you pick your brain regarding lore historical. I can't claim to be a greater expert than Fatebinder Rogalus, but I'll happily offer my perspective. Is there anything you can tell me about the sages? Fatebinder Rogalus audibly erupts before turning his back on the conversation. She chuckles. Beside the obvious antipathy that our compatriot holds for them, the School of Ink and Quill were an interesting bunch, not wildly different from our own order. In my opinion, like us, they observe and study, seek knowledge and arcane power, and cultivate some of the less obvious skills that aid in those endeavors. Sages, as often know as well as how to pick a lock or slip undetected through a manner as they know how to craft a missive or weave a cantrip. Had they not been so fucking selfish and short-sighted, they might have been made admirable allies to our cause. A sigh escapes her. The School of Ink and Quill were but the last of the guilds, schools, as the Tyrmans call their guilds, dedicated to recording their own little histories. Over the centuries, these local historians each met the advance of the Overlord. Some joined us, others perished. All know now Kairos' history. How do missive work exactly? Someone writes letters on the page, someone else reads them. Information passes between them. She smirks. Clever. Thank you, she bows. I try to keep my tongue sharp. If you're asking how missive get from one place to another, the short answer is a combination of birds and couriers. Many cities and strongholds keep an aviary, along with birds trained to ferry messages between specific locations. I don't know the details of that training, though I understand that it's very rewarding. She smiles. Maybe something to take up if I live long enough to retire. Surely birds can get everywhere. When birds won't do, either because the recipient has no aviary or is on the road, at the lines, couriers runs the missives from the nearest aviary to the communiques, independent recipient. This is all assuming missives that aren't overly sensitive. Some missives must be hand-delivered by trusted agents, something I've been tasked with more than once. Early in the conquest of the tiers, the sages were tapped for similar duties. The sages and some of the other magical guilds use birds specially prepared with rituals that allow them to find the intended recipient of a missive regardless of where they are in the tiers. All of this, though, is specific to this corner of the world. Okay. I hoped I might get your perspective on the Overlord. We can talk about plenty of things, but maybe not this, not here. Okay? I have some concerns about the war. You are free to share them in my confidence. She leans in closer. One second, let me ask you about something else. Yeah, I don't wanna give her any help on anything, really. Fatebinder Rogalus. Fatebinder, you return. Rogalus looks you up and down with an inscrutable expression. You look as if you have questions for me to untangle. Ask if I am feeling generous. Tell me about some of the past archons. Nox Miria, the Archon of Pestilence, was disliked in her circles. When she opened her eyes to see and her mouth to speak, it is said that flies would gust into the air, swarming so thick as to blacken the sky. She died in the 20th year of her birth, following a string of unusual and grotesque symptoms. Okay, really weird. What did you study when you were younger? I've been a ward of the court for as long as I've been aware. As a child, I demonstrated wholly perfect recall, and I absorbed all that Tunon and my tutors had to offer. I remember hating all the lectures and wishing I could learn at my pace. Funny how I envied the Sage of the Tears, how they could spend their whole lives reading and never exhaust their library. Of course now, the Venom Citadel is nothing more than a burning waste. What do you think about the other Fatebinders? You'll need to be more specific than that. I'm afraid there is, on last count, slightly more than a handful of us. What's your opinion on the Fatebinder of War? Your novel's keen, brash, and hearty braggart with a fondness for bloodshed. He can be utterly unbearable at times. His justice is fair, even if he skews towards rather exacting and uncompromising punishments at times. What's your opinion of the Fatebinder of Balance? Kalia was the finest among us. Her discernment is beyond reproach, and she is perhaps Tunan's favorite. She has a mind for suspicion and observation that makes others uneasy. We who operate within the confines of the law have nothing to fear, of course. What's your opinion of me? You take liberties with the freedom Tunon offers us. In spite of that, your objectivity is beyond question. You would, I think, execute plaintiff and defendant if neither was worthy in your eyes. Okay. Can you tell me about the Old Walls and the Bane? Which should I start? The Old Walls. We know little about the ancient structures, save that they predate all historical records. The forbidden ruins crisscrossed the Tiers and North alike, centuries before we raised our cities. The only one old enough to guess is likely Kairos. Okay, what about the Bane? The Bane are found in the Old Walls, but much of their defining qualities still escape me. They are creatures of smoke, claw, and fang. If you find yourself unfortunate enough to fight one, remember that spells are effective against them, but grab the attentions of others lurking nearby. Let's discuss something else. I'd like to know more about the Tiers. The political entities of the Tiers are essentially split between the Bastard Tier, the Younger Realm, and the Free Cities. Of which would you like to know? Tell me about the Bastard Tier. The Bastard Tier was the most northern of the Tiers, and was the first to bow to Kairos' reign. Though the knee they bent fell unwillingly, Kairos had his eye on the Bastard Tier for many years before he marched on their capital city. This is the hub of trade and commerce. Claim the markets and the people will follow. I'm curious to know more about the Younger Realms. The Younger Realms sprawl the middle and southernmost tiers and can be catalogued as follow: Apex, Azure, Haven, and Stalwart. Azure was renowned for its exceptional fertile land, which fed the whole of the tiers. That was before Kairos' Edict of Stone blighted the land. Stalwart is also worth mention, for it comprises the whole of the southernmost tier, and proves the toughest and most defensible of the realms. It is often said that the other realms will not fall while Stalwart yet stands. The local army wages bitter war against the disfavored, though the Edict of Storm has cut off the best of their defenses. It is only a matter of time before Stalwart falls. I would like to hear about the free cities. There are 3 free cities remaining: Last Arbor, Spiral's Maw, and Barris in Chains. The first and strongest of the free cities was the Setting Sun, which Kairos crushed in 429 with the Edict of Tumult. After that, the remaining free cities were quick to surrender. Okay. Let's talk about the sages. I will not speak of the sages. They are no better than charlatans and cons, wholly selfish in their ill pursuit to hoard all knowledge from others. They are self-blinded by their own deception and clever manipulations. They alone cause their own undoing and are solely to blame for the burning library, one of the most grievous of wrongs in the known histories, for which they can never be forgiven. Wow, he really hates them. Like, really hates them. You return. It is gratifying to see that the war has not caused you to forget your roots. What is it you wish to know? I have a request from Barrick of the Stone Shields. And what does Barrick of the Stone Shields want of the court? He has made his displeasure known in a loud inner voice to collapse the tears upon each other. The adjudicator glares down at Barrick. He came to inquire if the Forgebound could help remove his armor. If he has become encased in iron, that is none of the court's concern. My forge-bound smiths are occupied crafting weapons for the army, and I will not have their focus diverted to liberate one soldier from his raiment. Stone Shield, do the disfavored not have standards for the upkeep of arms and armor? Is this not one of your Archon's guiding principle? It is, Your Honor, but I found myself trapped in this junk pile after the Edict of Storm hit Stalwart. If you want to blame anyone, it should be Kairos. The adjudicator contemplates the matter in total silence. The moment drags on far longer than you would suspect it warrants, but Tunan's interests do not abate for a moment. The soldier will remain encased in his armor, eccentric though it may be, and all subjects of Kairos are forbidden to aid in its removal. Magic the likes of which none of us understands has touched the stone shield, and we will not interfere with the will of Kairos. But I'm trapped, Barrick trails off, looking to you for answers. Your Honor, could you not reconsider? I'm surprised and disappointed that you would even ask. Whatever you are trying to prove to your traveling companion, the court finds it festering with sympathy in the lack of precedent. Such is the will of Kairos and the will of the court. Tunan nods and bangs his gavel. You try, and I suppose that counts for something. The adjudicator didn't say anything about me bending my way out of here, at least. Not that trying has ever made it better. Tell me about Kairos. Insufficient reputation. I'm in privileged position to know Kairos better than the other Archons, and I do not treat this knowledge lightly. When I trust that your interests will aid in the execution of law, I will speak of this, but not before. Tell me about Bleeding Mark. He is my headsman and an assassin without equal. His official designation in Kairos' hierarchy is the Archon of Shadows, though I wonder that he ever considered himself aught but a slayer of the unjust. How did he earn this title? His work away from the court takes Bleeding Mark to the dark places of the world, to the Tears and Northern Empire alike. Over time, Shadows became his dominion. They cloak him, protect him, and even fight for him if the needs arise. It is said that Bleeding Mark can travel to any place where shadows are cast, only he would know for certain. Does Bleeding Mark serve you alone? Your question is flawed. We are all servants of Kairos. The Archons are also agents of their own interest. Those chosen few, empowered to bring order to the world in accordance with Kairos' peace. At present, Bleeding Mark is my vassal, and I his patron. The relationship is not so different from Graven Ash and Cairn, the fallen Archon, or the voices of the rat and his songbird Siren. Such partnerings and apprenticeships are common. They provide mutual benefits for the Archons involved, as well as a measure of oversight. Okay, no, mistakes. I'm curious about you, Archon. Curiosity is not a trait that I encourage in my servants. Too often have I witnessed such activity leading down a path to lawlessness. However, I feel that a better understanding of me will inform your work, and I will allow it. What would you know? Tell me about your rise to become adjudicator. Curb your ambition, student. My path to this days is not one that could be replicated under any circumstances. However, if your curiosity is determined, I will tell you my story. I'm going to go with 3. I wish to understand law and your execution of it. An admirable pursuit. You know much of Kairos' law and the maintenance of order already. My history may tell you something of how it can be used to win wars. I came into the world centuries ago before the dream of an unified Northern Empire was fully realized. My home country lay far from the borders of Kairos' realm, and our conquest was a matter of distant speculations. Decades before rumor of Kairos' approach grew in panicked volume, I familiarized myself with the intricacies of her law. It took me no time at all to realize the benefits of our inevitable subjugation. I took it upon myself to rise in my country's governance as an arbiter of law and drafter of covenants, building some notoriety for my execution of fair justice. As my influence and the trust of my people evolved, my decisions transcended to define future precedent. Go on. What my countrymen could not have surmised was that I had woven into our customs the very backbone of Kairos' law. I set the stage for the conquest of our floundering nations to join the Overlord's empire. By the time the Overlord's army presented themselves and offered terms of surrender, we had adopted Kairos' peace in all but name. Our absorption in the Northern Empire was a matter of legal formality, negligible changes to our already beloved document of law. The people credited me as the architect of peace and for a time called me Tunon the Fair, as my importance grew in their estimate. Kairos could not help but learn of the part I played in her bloodless victory. Kairos' law has a breadth of intricacies that is unapproachable to the masses. I was chosen to interpret and represent the Overlord's will across the Northern Empire and beyond. This time as adjudicator. It is my pride, my duty, my life. What does it mean to be an Archon? I am a figure of power and significance, and under Kairos' mandate I am able to exercise my authority for the benefit of all. Had I not earned the Overlord's approval, I would not stand tall before you. Did you come into power yourself, or did Kairos foster your talents? An astute question. Doubtless, I exhibited some spark of potential on my own, insignificant though enough to accomplish deeds of notes. Only under Kairos' tutelage have I grown to these heights. Could anyone become an Archon? Absolutely not. Only a precious few grow into this authority, where otherwise, Terrorists would descend into pandemonium. Of those few who rise into power, fewer still have the self-control to make lawful use of their talents, and of those who can, fewer still are deemed worthy of Kairos' approval. Is every Archon subservient to Kairos? All are subservient before Kairos, but I intuit your meaning. The Overlord takes great pains to recognize potential. Before an Archon comes into their power, they will have faced the harshest scrutiny by an agent of recruiting, if not Blenmark himself. Those who are found worthy of incredible deeds but refuse to join their strength to the needs of the Empire are doomed to die. Those who wish to make a name for themselves are invited into the fold to serve and rule the needs of the Empire. This is the price of power in Kairos' hierarchy. Let's go back to my other questions. What's the deal with your mask? What's the deal with your mask? This should be obvious to you by now, student. Since the answer is irrelevant to your duties, I will tolerate your ignorance and explain. The face is an uncontrollable warrant of muscle spasm and reactionary contortions, sickening in its display of every petty bias. I cannot be trusted to audience or judge a dispute without navigating a gauntlet of subjectivity for all to witness. Go on. In my early days before the Northern Empire spread to my lands, I fashioned the mask of listening out of stern, uncaring wood. This expression of enduring patience hearkens the testimony of my petitioners, taking in all evidence before winging matters in their due course. Later in my career, Kairos herself gifted me the Mask of Resolve. You will find it almost identical to the Mask of Listening, save for the brow furrowed in contemplation and weighed down by the burden of judgment. This is the face that dispenses law, often the most exacting and unforgiving sort. I wore it when I brought Kairos' devastating judgment to the bastard city, and doubtless I will wear it again. What do you look like underneath the masks? Tunon hovers in silence, staring down at you. There's an option called back away slowly. Let's return to my other questions. Did you come up with the Office of Fatebinders? Indirectly, yes. Just as I am the representative of Kairos' law across Tyranny, you are the face of my judgment for the people. I took inspiration from the Overlord's example, as we all should. The people needed an approachable face to settle their grievance, and I am not available to educate on every sharecropper's dispute. The Fatebinders were an inevitable solution. Why is curiosity such a problem? Because my vassals are not selected for their independence of thought, you are an agent of law, the execution of which falls within strict confines. Your intellect may aid the task ahead of you, but your unwavering obedience is of greater value to me. I'm going to go with 3. Don't you want to interpret Kairos' law to fit any circumstances? Naturally, but take care to not let your intellect